Center for the Ethiopian Educational Information and Communication Technology presents Educational Satellite Television Programs.
Hello teacher, hello students. Welcome to today's lesson on the history of the struggles of the nations, nationalities, and peoples of Ethiopia against oppression. Today, we are beginning a new unit on equality. This unit will build on your studies in previous grades. You will discuss the relationship between individual rights and group rights. You will also study the necessity for affirmative action to reverse past discrimination and injustice. You will learn about the importance of recognizing unity in diversity. In this lesson, we will begin to talk about the history of the struggles of the nations, nationalities, and peoples of Ethiopia against oppression. This is the first of several lessons on this subject. Today, we will focus on the Gojam Peasants struggle, the first Wayoni movement of Tigray, and the Ballet Peasants struggle. This lesson and the ones that follow are very important because they will provide a basis for our understanding of the importance of equality in present-day Ethiopia. If you are ready, we will begin. Students, in the grade 12 textbook, you can see a photo of the living conditions of Ethiopian peasants during feudal times. The image reveals several things. The peasants are poorly clothed. You can also see that their dwelling place is a small and unstable structure. In feudal and imperial times, the largest percentage of the Ethiopian population was composed of peasants. These peasants were severely exploited by the feudal and imperial systems. For example, they were heavily taxed. Students, please work with a partner to list other ways that the peasants were exploited.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back. Thank you for your participation. Let us list some of the ways in which the peasants of Ethiopia were exploited in the feudal and imperial times. Tenants were required to pay 75% of their produce to landlords and to provide free labor for the landlord's farms. They also had to provide free transport for his crops, firewood for his fuel, and service as domestic servants. In some areas, peasants had special skills in pottery, weaving, tanning, or metalwork, and they had to provide these services free as well. In addition, the peasants were not given access to education. They had limited or no access to health care, and they were not allowed to vote or to take part in government. They also lived in constant fear of being evicted, which would leave them homeless. Peasants in Ethiopia suffered from poor administration, corruption, and lack of social services. They did not remain indifferent to their hardships. Typically, when the peasants rebelled, they were suppressed by government force. Before we look at the specific examples of peasant revolts, students, please write a paragraph in which you explain the longer-term consequences of rebellion and suppression.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up! Let's get back to our lesson.
Good work, everyone. Please keep your answers, as your teacher will want to see them after this lesson for further discussion. The immediate consequences of rebellion are conflict, anger, rioting, and violence. Rebellion means that people rise in force against their oppressors and attempt to overthrow the unjust system. When rebellions are suppressed by force, there are some longer-term consequences. The force usually involves violence and intimidation. In the longer term, stricter government control will be exerted to stop another rebellion from taking place. This leads to further exploitation and oppression. As a result, the people become even more angry and rebellious, which often leads to further violence. Let us look at some examples of peasant rebellions in Ethiopia. The first one we will discuss is the Gojam Peasant Rebellion of 1968. This was one of the strong peasant resistances against the feudal government. It was caused by the government's attempt to increase the amount of taxes as well as the services peasants were forced to give for free. The purpose for the extra tax and extra contributions was to erect a statue of the emperor. Extra funding was required due to poor administration. The peasants reacted to this injustice by rejecting the tax assessors and petitioning the emperor. The government failed to respond, so the peasants rebelled. The government sent the police and the army to suppress them and regain control. This was not the first peasant uprising. Looking farther back, there was the first Woyani movement, which took place in Tigray immediately after the liberation of Ethiopia from Italian occupation in 1941. The major causes of this rebellion were administrative inefficiency, corruption, and the greed of the army stationed in Raya and Azabo. In this uprising, the rebels achieved some victories at first. They controlled several towns including Endeusis, Kuya, and Mekelle. However, the government, with the help of British forces using aircraft, crushed this revolt. The third example of a peasant uprising that we will discuss today is the Ballet Peasant Rebellion, which took place between 1963 and 1970. This rebellion erupted after the government increased land taxes. Another major cause of discontent was the enforced settlement of Christians in a Muslim region. At first, the government tried to calm the peasants by promising to return the land it had taken. However, 2 governors were killed, and the government response became more brutal. Students, this is the end of our first lesson on the history of oppression in Ethiopia. We will learn about the outbreak of the Ethiopian Revolution next time. Until then, thank you, teacher. Thank you, students.